I'm going to create a topography using a JPEG that I'm going to drag into the drawing. A topography being the contours, the 3D contours and the site that the property will sit on. If I open up my Windows Explorer down here and I pop into our folder on S drive, you can see that there's a site plan example JPG. I'm going to just click on it with my left button on the mouse and I'm going to drag it into the site and click again. Now notice I was already in the site, not the site plan that we have duplicated and renamed. So remember, this one is our working one and this one is the one that's going to be presented on a title sheet later on. When I've dragged this in, actually it comes in at a reasonable size, but it's hard to see everything, so I'm going to adjust two things straight up. The first thing being, do not crop the view, so I'm going to click on that so I can see the entire image or everything that appears on this screen. And the second is that if I make it WF for wireframe, I'll be able to see through, everything gets turned on so that it's just the edges that I can see. So first up, when I'm clicking on this, I'm leaving locked proportions up here. So I want it to stay in scale or in proportion. I'm just using my left and right arrows, or I can click and I can drag. And what I'm trying to do is to line up 2 points over the top of each other. This property has a property boundary already drawn on the image, and so I'm lining up the top right of the property of my REVIT drawing with the top right of the property line of the image file. Now that gives me a base point. I could have lined up any two. It doesn't matter which one as long as it's correct. So now that it's selected, okay, so I'm just clicking in and out of it, can you see that in our contextual bar I have an option which is scale, or RE. And if I click on that, it's going to prompt me down here for a couple of things to do. The first one is to enter the origin, or the base point as some of you might know it. Now that is those 2 points that I just lined up. The second one is enter the drag point. So what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the end of the JPEG, which is here, and I'm saying actually the size I want you to be is that one. So it's 1, 2, 3. I'll just quickly do that again. I select the image, I click on scale. The first point I selected the two boundary points that sit over the top of each other, and I click on that end. I'm looking down and seeing it says select drag point, so the end of the image file, and then the end of the REVIT file, i.e. the length that it actually could be. I could see how that is 40 meters? I could actually just physically type in 40, 1, 2, 3, and I've resized my JPEG, so now that I can use the contours that have been created. Now obviously because it's a JPEG, i.e. a pixelated image file, I need to remember that that is never going to be perfect, but for what we're doing, it's a really good start. So I'm in massing and site, and I'm going to topo surface just here. Gives us a little video of what we're trying to achieve. And place point is our default, and that's what I wanted to do. Now remember, when I'm putting this information in, unlike surveying drawings, which you enter in meters, in REVIT, and you can change this in units if you wanted to, but we don't, I'm going to put this in millimeters. So my 14 meters that I've got here is going to be 14000. If you don't do that, you're going to have a very flat and wrong site. And all I need to do now is just click dots. You can put as many or as few in as you want along the contours. Often you will be given a drawing that is a DWG from a surveyor, even though they have lovely continuous splines or curves or arcs to follow for the contours, you still need to be placing these points. The more you put in, the more accurate your site's going to be, the longer it's going to take. So it's up to you how many you want to do. 14.5. So I make sure I do this very methodically. I just work from one side to the other. If you ever be in a position where you're clicking and then as you do it you start to lose the information underneath it, it's because you haven't set it to wireframe. So just WF it, i.e. down here, wireframe, WF, and then you'll be able to see your image. Now I'm just going to quickly finish plugging these in. Before I do that, because I'm going to fast forward it, I'm going to make some educated decisions on what happens at the corners because I haven't given a contour point for this one. So can you see, if I look at that, they look fairly evenly spaced. It looks like a consistent slope along the whole property. So if that was 14.5 and that was 14, I'm going to make a decision that this is probably half a metre lower again around here. This one here isn't quite halfway. I'm going to make it 15,800. And the one in the top corner, 16,500, because it does look almost halfway. Down here, what have we got? 14, so I'll make that 14,400. Okay, so you can see I'm just making some guesses, good educated decisions based on all of the information I have available to me, which is at the moment just a JPEG. In reality, you might have some Google Street View, or you might have some site photographs, or you might be able to jump online and get some contours off PD online. So you grab as much information as you possibly can to start with, but in the event that you don't have anything to work with other than just something like this, then you need to make just some good educated decisions and then make a point of going back later and double checking that information. You certainly don't want to know that this one drops back off and that's going to affect what happens up here. Just going to finish inputting this information in quickly. And we finish the topography off by clicking on the big green tick. Go and check your work. I'm going to look at it in 3D view. Change it to shaded so you can see what's going on, and that looks pretty good. If you ever happen to get to this point and check it, and you realise that there's a random point, it's often because you've forgotten or added an extra 0. So it's normally really quite obvious when that happens. It'll look like something like that. In which case, you can see that it's easy enough to click on these points and then just adjust them accordingly. So that's why I think it's important to just be double checking and doing it methodically when you're inputting it.